and that's great. A lot of different items and different angles get brought up that wouldn't be. But I want to cover the global meltdown. And can we avert it? Or if we have to go through it, how do we make it not as severe? And how do we make sure the globalists that did this don't get more power out of it, like Ron Paul says in the speech I was just playing excerpts of earlier? Okay? Believe me, folks, I wish I was wrong. I wish Max Keiser was wrong. I wish Bob Chapman had been wrong. I wish Eber Griffin had been wrong. I wish Ron Paul was wrong. I wish all the other economists, Gerald Celente and people were wrong. But the globalists did this on purpose. That's why they've been building up the police state. And now they're saying, oh, we're going to build a police state to keep everybody safe, just like they've done in other cultures and other civilizations. But they engineered it is the point. They don't want things to get better. 877-789-ALEX, 877-789-ALEX. The phones are now open. 877-789-ALEX. 2539 is what Alex translates out to. 877-789-ALEX. Going back to Max Keiser. Max, this is a short segment. Long segment's coming up. But give us a prelude. I want to take a few calls, but I want to get your take on how you see this collapse happening. Like you said, it's in all the big financial publications, but the more elitist ones, mainline pedestrian ones, are everything's fine, invest today, sponsored by Fidelity. But when you look at the establishment, they're all digging in. They got militaries ready to shut everything down to protect the ultra-rich neighborhoods. They're digging in like it's the end of the world. And I've always known that we were moving in this direction, but now we're so close. Is there any way to dodge this bullet?
Well, I wanted to draw your attention to something that happened last week, which is very telling. You saw that this UK bank, Standard Chartered, got caught up in an investigation by a U.S. regulator for laundering money, essentially, for Iran. One of the internal emails from Standard Chartered said when this investigation started a while back, the effing Americans can go F themselves if they think they can tell us how to run our business. And why this is revealing is because you've asked me on your show many times, why do these banks do this? Are they themselves going to perish in the fire of this collapse? And the answer, of course, is yes, but it's a game of musical chairs, and the banks right now are sorting out who is going to survive. Standard Chartered is a huge bank. It's now at war with Wall Street. Wall Street is now at war with the UK banking system. The UK banking system is HSBC, Barclays Bank with LIBOR, HSBC with Mexican drug money laundering cartel, and now Standard Chartered with Iranian money laundering. They have now taken positions, the City of London versus Wall Street. This is what I knew was going to happen, and this is what happens at the end game. This is when the banks, they're going to fight to finish who's going to be the supremo and winner in all of this. And, of course, the winner will be, as we alluded to before the break, those economies with the most gold. And the two economies that stand out that are in the worst position are the UK, with less than 300 tons of gold, and Japan has virtually no gold. Those are actually the two biggest losers immediately as we head into the crash. Japan has a debt to GDP over 200%, Alex. That's almost double what the U.S. has. And the UK, if you add all the private debt of their banks, they have debt to GDP of 800%. So these two economies, multi-trillion-dollar economies, are really the first into the black hole. But they are not the main event. The main event, of course, will be the U.S. when it goes against the euro. But I think the euro is going to survive ultimately against the dollar. The dollar is the linchpin currency. It is the world reserve currency. It is the currency in which all derivatives around the world, 800 trillion, are priced in dollars. So when the dollar goes, it sucks everything down with it. And but before that happens, we'll see Japan and the UK into the black hole. And of course, what I tell people is when Ron Paul says the all-powerful state is the enemy, I wish there was some state. There is no state. There are only banksters.
Well, it is the global bankster state. They've said that. And that's what some libertarians...
But if you're dealing with the cancer of banksters, the only solution is to own physical precious metals. Don't
stay there. Got a break. We've told you for a long time there'd be a global derivatives meltdown for at least 14 years with economists like George Humphrey, former Austin City Council member, friend of mine, successful businessman is the most important thing, what I admire him most about. I need to get him back in studio. He lives all over the world, so good luck catching him in Austin a few months out of the year. He was the first guy back in 98 who said derivatives, Alex, they're worse than fractional reserve banking, and they are going to sell them to all the governments, tie everything into it. He used the term too big to fail, and he said they're going to hold us all hostage. That impresses me when somebody 14 years ago, by the way, get me Humphrey. He's been out of town, right? Because I've been saying I want him in studio. Problem is, you get him in here, he'll never talk about himself. He'll never go back and talk about the books he wrote saying it. But Max Keiser, who's been predicting it all as well, joins us. Former top stockbroker, retired now. And, of course, he also invented the virtual trading system that's used on most stock markets today. Must be nice to be retired at his age. Actually, he's not retired. He works probably harder now than ever, but he's a journalist. Max, I want to go to calls in the next segment, but let's cover the waterfront. Break down the pillars of the collapse, the different ways it can be triggered, the next countries to go down in the euro. As you mentioned earlier, even the big Swiss central bank is saying, get ready. Chicago Tribune, Reuters, Fox News, all saying collapse. The big mega banks that own the Federal Reserve are being told, sell off assets, get yourself in order. We can't inflate anymore. But then Bernanke's been hinting at QE3. Would QE3 stave that off? Because the U.S., everything's based in U.S. dollar derivatives, as you said, and it's the petrodollar as well. But it's darned if you do, damned if you do, damned if you don't, because still, okay, the rest of the world collapses, then we collapse last, or we collapse first, they collapse. I mean, it's a seesaw. We start collapsing, and then Europe goes up, but then they collapse, and we go back up. But overall, society's rotting. Where is it all going? What are we going to see happen in Europe? What will it look like if J.P. Morgan Chase goes under? What's happening?
Well, there's a number of different fires, that are burning right now. One of the biggest is in agricultural prices. Of course, corn, as you well know, is hitting all-time, or multi-decade highs.
And we all predicted that.
Right. And so this, one of the steadfast rules in economics is when a society spends more than 40% of its disposable income on food, you tend to get revolutions. We saw this in Egypt recently. There was a big spike in food prices around the world, and this triggered the revolution.
Why is there a food bubble?
Well, most of it comes from speculation, again, from this battle between Wall Street and the rest of the world using derivatives. And that speculation is made possible by things like quantitative easing and other Fed policies that keep interest rates near zero. Because when the speculators borrow money, the cost of them borrowing money is zero. It's not like you or me where our credit card is 16%, or we get a penalty, it goes to 30%, or the mortgages, or whatever the mortgage is. If you're a speculator on Wall Street, you get to borrow money at 0%. And of course, the way it's set up is when you make a mistake and like Knight Capital last week, they blew up because of automatic algorithmic trading. $440 million blew up in 45 minutes. They get a cram down, they get a bailout from their friends on Wall Street. But, of course, that's not available to anyone else. If they get into financial trouble, they don't get their friends to, pass the bowl and bail you out within 2 days. No. But so the artificially low interest rates through quantitative easing and all these other Fed policies keep rates near zero. That means the cost of borrowing is near zero. That means if you're a speculator and you know that the price of corn is going higher and this is causing an effect on itself, a feedback mechanism, that's only getting worse, you can keep that price rising with this borrowed money. So that's a huge fire going on in the global economy, is agricultural speculation. Then you have these Franken markets, these like the Knight Capital or the flash crashes or the derivatives crashes that are happening on exchanges all over the world. 86% of all the volume on the New York Stock Exchange are computers trading with computers. They're not humans anymore. They're all programmed to trade with each other to generate fees for the people who write the program.
And so more and more, it is a casino gulag where average people cannot make it. Pension funds are being cheated. The system is eating itself.
Well, speaking of the casino gulag, you see that Facebook now in the UK is going to offer online gambling with British pounds. So legalized online gambling from Facebook, as I predicted, is coming. And there's a huge push to bring this legalized gambling to America. So people won't have jobs, but they'll have access to tokens and food stamps that they can then use to gamble with.
And government's going to subsidize that, just like in Europe and the U.S., where illegals are given other people's tax ID numbers, and then the IRS holds the citizen responsible and takes their money for what the illegal does. I mean, this is beyond a criminal system. This is like the Mad Hatter Tea Party.
Well, another prediction I made on your show last year, Alex, was that one stock, I don't recommend stocks, as an investor really, but more as a social commentary. One stock that I said was going to hit new highs was, Corrections Corps of America just hit another new high, because the business model of prisons and the corruption in the justice system to get people into prison is feeding that industry in a way that's making private prison operators very wealthy in this economy. So that's the gulag. So here you have Facebook giving online gambling via Facebook. That's the casino. And then Corrections Corps of America is the gulag. And these two are together now.
All right, let me ask you this question. I want to ask you how war comes into it, because they always do that near a collapse. And why am I seeing police and military and even mainstream news saying, get ready for martial law in late October, early November? I keep getting that. And I'm not saying that's going to happen, but the police and military are being told that. What do you think's happening there?
There's a collapse coming. Financial. Look at Greece. Greece collapsed. Ireland basically collapsed. There's pockets of economies around the world that are in collapse. There's depression around the world. The U.S. is going through kind of a stealth depression. If you add up the people on food stamps or people who are uninsured.
They've doubled the number of people on welfare in 4 years. I mean,
the number of people who are either at or below the poverty line in the U.S. is 100 million people. Out of 300 million.
These are electronic food stamps.
Right. And that, of course, who processes the electronic food stamps? JP Morgan. That's one of their big businesses. They're the ones who supply all the architecture and the electronics.
So it's a camouflage giant soup kitchen. We didn't have 100 million people at soup kitchens in the Great Depression. Now we do.
It's worse than the Great Depression in many ways, because they're also you have the Dust Bowl during the Great Depression. So that's similar. Also, you have the Dust Bowl and the Depression equally as you did back in the 30s. But back in the 30s, you had people still on family farms that could grow their own food, but they're criminalizing that, aren't they, Alex? So that those people will end up in prison, and of course they feed Corrections Corps of America, and then they can play gambling on the Facebook Casino Gulag page. So
incredible.
So it's much worse than the Depression.
What about the war card? I mean, obviously that's now steaming ahead off the rails. I mean, that always goes along with this, doesn't it?
The war card, to me, is the poor man's election gimmick. The people who are in presidential election cycles, because they're not smart enough to be Wall Street banksters, they're just warmongers. And as they get closer to an election, they'll start a war. Because if they were smart, they'd be on Wall Street making their money that way. It's interesting that Mitt Romney, of course, comes from Wall Street. He's a private equity guy. And he's an asset stripper, and he's a guy who's destroyed, the economy in many, many different ways. It's going to be interesting to see how he plays the war card. The people who are over him, the media companies that, of course, position the war on their network television as a spectacle. They want war, especially as we go into the election cycle. So he may become a warmonger like the rest. He could just be an asset stripper and a Wall Street bankster. I guess he's multi-talented in this way. We'll see.
Well, he has promised to be multi-talented. He said, look, I'm not just going to strip companies and ship jobs overseas. Look at his precious Paul Ryan voted for the banker bailout, but he's hailed as the most conservative person since Ronald Reagan or something. I thought that was Ron Paul.
Well, that's kind of a different topic, really. I hear the music. I think we're going to break now.
Yes, we are. Max Keiser is our guest of MaxKeiser.com. I'm Alex Jones. We're going to go to your calls. Straight ahead, MJ, Gail, JB, Baron, Victoria, Steve, Aaron. We'll get to all of you straight ahead. I'm Alex Jones.
Revolution.